The series opens in Sekigahara, where Shimazu Toyohisa is left alone with a couple of troops to make an opening for his uncle, the commander of the Shimazu troops, to escape. Toyohisa manages to mortally injure the enemy general, and likewise he gets critically wounded, but a couple of arrows and stabs won't put the mad lad down as he proudly stands his ground and refuses to die, scaring the enemy army and forcing them to retreat due to Toyohisa's Gigachad aura. Anyways, walking from the battlefield wounded and bleeding, Toyohisa finds himself transported to a corridor of doors, where a middle-aged man at a desk waits for him. So the monkey decides to do the only thing he knows, bonk a supreme being, which turns out to be very stupid after getting sucked into one of the doors and dropped into a field, unconscious. Two elven children with no sense of stranger danger find Toyohisa and decide to bring him to Castle Ruins, a hideout for two other drifters. Getting closer to the castle, another drifter, Yoichi, tells them to stop, and if they move, he will kill them. The elves explain that Toyohisa is also a drifter and that he is dying. Realizing that Toyohisa is a drifter, Yoichi tells them to leave him and leave. Oda Nobunaga from the ruins asks Yoichi what is going on, and he explains that Toyohisa is likely from Japan and is injured. They decide to tend to his wounds and see if he will survive. After Toyohisa wakes up, he finds out that his wounds are stitched, but what surprised him the most was a crazy old man claiming to be the demon king of the Six Heavens, Oda Nobunaga. And as expected, Toyohisa didn't believe that he is the real Nobunaga, as the OG was killed 18 years before Toyohisa's involvement in the Battle of Sekigahara. He also meets Yoichi, a sussy-looking archer who died almost 4 centuries ago. Nobunaga and Yoichi explain that before their supposed deaths, they ended up in a strange stone passage with multiple doors and a man sitting in front of them. Hearing that, Toyohisa states that he also met him while leaving Sekigahara. Outside of their hideout, a cute spy monitors the drifters. She gets contacted by a man via a magical crystal ball to check on her status. The man with the sick fashion style belongs to an organization known as the Octobrist. The man declares his intentions to meet the drifters and then orders his men to get ready, preparing for the upcoming war with the Ends, an opposing force advocating for the destruction of the world. On the other side of the spectrum, two drifters, Hannibal and Scipio Africanus, are in the middle of a heated argument, while a member from the Octobrist organization observes them from afar. The observer gets ordered by the man in white, Abe, to bring the drifters to him in preparations for the war against the Ends. Meanwhile, the elven village located near Toyohisa's group of drifters is attacked and set on fire by soldiers from the Orda Empire for associating with the drifters. The big oofsie on their part as the main man smells blood, thusly sprinting to the village to rescue the elves, repaying his debt to the young elves for helping him earlier. At the village, Aron lines up the elves and tells them they saved a drifter. He reminds them it's forbidden for them to enter the forest and associate with the drifters. Shara complains that they need to enter the forest to get firewood and to hunt, and as they took their women, he thinks they are basically telling them to die. Byram confirms they need to die, along with the other demihumans like dwarves and hobbits, and then kills the village leader. They start killing elves, with Aram explaining they are allowed to kill 50% of them. Aram then receives news that there is a fire in the wheat field. Toyohisa then charges and starts killing soldiers. Joined by Nobunaga and Yoichi, they easily defeat the douchebags. But it's not enough. Enraged by the carnage and cruelty inflicted upon the elves by the Empire's soldiers, Toyohisa brutally beats the commander in charge of massacring the elves with the sheath of his sword and starts hitting him over and over and over. It was so bad that Dentist would be a millionaire after fixing his teeth. That would have been the case if Toyohisa didn't order the elves to kill him themselves. Back in the corridor of doors, the bespectacled man Murasaki is visited by his nemesis, a goth chick named Easy, who mocks his efforts to send drifters to the unknown world to combat her Ends, who have begun invading the southern regions of the world. Bringing us to the kingdom of Carneades in the southern regions, Abe is worried that the Black King is coming. But the Carneades warriors try to assure him they are fine, as they have never managed to breach their wall. Looking at them, Abe realizes they won't even last 2 days and decides to go and see the situation with Kafedo in hopes that the two old drifters would lead the army and save the country. Abe and his subordinate try to convince the commanders of the defensive troops to let Scipio and Hannibal take charge of their army. However, the leaders refuse to give the two drifters command over their troops, not only because Hannibal looks like a guy who would eat a rat, but also because the commanders want to stay in charge. A foolish decision resulted in Abe withdrawing the Octobrists and the drifters from the country as the Ends in their army, consisting of dragons, goblins, and other non-human races, begin their attack. The leader of the Ends, the Black King, sends Hijikata Toshizo, John Dark, and Anastasia Nikolaevna Romanova into the battlefield and questions Minamoto no Yoshitsune if his allegiance is with the drifters or the Ends. The Chad Yoshitsune vaguely states he will go with the side that interests him the most. As the Black King's army continues the attack, a door opens in the sky and a World War II Japanese airplane comes out piloted by Kano Naoshi. Naoshi wonders where is he and why there are people flying on dragons. Toshizo, Jeanne d'Arc, and Anastasia easily break the walls and starts killing soldiers. Seeing all the destruction of the city, Naoshi is reminded of bombings in Japan and gets angry. Abe takes Scipio and Hannibal to Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, but before escaping, he asks if they will lead their army if they stand a chance against the Black King. Hannibal says the chances aren't zero, and Abe comments that if they unite with the samurais, then there is hope. As they escape, Butch and Sundance gun down all the enemies they see. They eventually face a dragon, but Naoshi comes and shoots it with his plane and then proceeds into shooting down other dragons. Meanwhile, the female spy monitoring Toyohisa's group is discovered by the main man and his companions. The spy Olmanu informs the drifters that they have been brought to the New World to fight against the Ends, though the base trio quickly rejects the idea. Olmanu explains to Toyohisa, Nobunaga, and Yoichi that their purpose as drifters is to save the world from being annihilated by the Ends. To accomplish this, she informs them that the Octobrists are tasked with gathering the drifters together and appealing to the kings and feudal lords of the various states and countries to give command over their armies to the drifters. However, the Demon King knows better, and he's certain that the lords wouldn't allow outsiders to take charge of their armies. Instead, Papa Nobunaga proposes that the drifters, led by Toyohisa, take over the Orda Empire, scaring Olmanu. Grigory Rasputin reports to Black King that they have completely overtaken Carniatas. As he reports for the casualties, the Black King tells him to bring him all the injured ones as he will save them since they are his brethren. He goes and starts healing the injuries and tells Rasputin to tell everyone that the Northern Wall had fallen, and those that didn't believe it or fear the humans will now join their ranks. The Black King reveals he wanted to save the humans, but as they rejected him, he will now save demi-humans and destroy the humans. He tells the Ends they need to go after the drifters and kill them, as they are their only enemy. Back in the Elven village, Toyohisa's group offers to assist the elves with their fight against Orte to reclaim their state, though Toyohisa and Nobunaga fight over the leadership arrangements, as Nobunaga wants the mad lad to lead, but Toyohisa doesn't want to. They get interrupted by the eldest son of the murdered village's chief, who pleads for their help. Toyohisa agrees to take the role of the commander and begins to set a trap for the Orte forces set to arrive in 3 days. Nobunaga asks Olmanu to tell him about the elves, and she explains that decades ago the humans attacked, defeated, and subjugated them. On the 3rd day, a force of 200 Orte troops marches into the village only to find it uninhabited. Camping outside of the village in the forest, the drifters and elves prepare to strike the Orte soldiers at nightfall. At the abandoned castle, Toyohisa says that they will kill everyone tonight. Before the ambush planned by the drifters, Nobunaga uses corpses and various human waste to create a saltpeter pit after Toyohisa buries the heads of the deceased as a sign of respect. Meanwhile, the trap begins to train the elves in archery and is surprised to learn that they have an innate aptitude for it. That said, night sinks in, and the Orte troops notice that the village's water well got filled with shit. Toyohisa announced they will be attacking the village this night and then march towards the lord's castle and kill him. Nobunaga is surprised, but Toyohisa tells him that he was told why there were no women in the village. As the elves reproduce only once a year, during that time the women are taken by the lord and his men. Nobunaga realizes this is an attempt to drive them to extinction. Toyohisa inspires the elves and they attack the village. While Toyohisa and the elves launch their attack on the Orte soldiers, Nobunaga forms an enclosure to trap the Orte troops and continuously bombards them with waste-laden arrows, resulting in wounds they can't clean since the water is already filthy. Toyohisa then moves between the whole army and kills the commander, making the rest of the army run in fear. The elves start celebrating that they won, but Toyohisa tells them they still need to take the castle. Nobunaga realizes Toyohisa doesn't have a plan but tells him he has one and dresses everyone as the Orte soldiers. Elsewhere, the escaping soldiers fall into traps and the remaining are killed by Yoichi and his group. The Lord is informed of the troops' return and they let them inside the castle. As the Lord comes, they reveal themselves and Toyohisa asks for where the women are and the Lord points at the tower. The Lord wonders about his soldiers, but Nobunaga tells him most are dead and Yoichi is hunting the rest. While heading towards the tower, Toyohisa tells them it's disgrace to kill those that had give up the sword. But reaching the room with the women and seeing what they were doing with them, he gets angry and says he was wrong and is going to kill them all. Nobunaga tells the elves to search the castle for all kinds of documents. Olmanu comes and is surprised they managed to take the castle. Nobunaga points at a large portrait of Adolf Hitler and wonders who he is, and Olmanu explains he's the father of Orte, the one that founded it, but they still don't know if he is drifters or ends. 60 years ago, he appeared and instigated people to rise against government. With his speeches, he caught the people's hearts and initiated a rebellion. But after founding Orte, he ends his life. Nobunaga then gets informed that Toyohisa dragged the soldiers out and plans to kill him. Nobunaga rushes to him, commenting on that, given how beautiful the males were, it was obvious what they were doing to the females. He doesn't want Toyohisa to do that, as it's his job. Before Toyohisa can give the order to kill them, Nobunaga hits him from behind and knocks him, and then orders the elves to kill the soldiers. The elves shot everyone except one man, who kept telling them that he never touched the women and was just transferred there. Then the drifters returned the women to their respective villages with a proclamation, which contains information about the heavy losses Orte is suffering from waging wars with numerous states. As a result, elven villages across the land begin to revolt and join the drifters. Saint Jeremy, a powerful aristocrat and former ally to Hitler who owns a quarter of the Orte Empire, hears the news of how they are losing territory and realizes the country is done for. Saint Jeremy visits the leaders of Orte and informs them that their naval fleet that carries supplies for their army in the west has been destroyed. Saint Jeremy then comments about the elves, but the leaders don't take it seriously, making Saint Jeremy realize the country is indeed done for. Saint Jeremy then decides to leave and meet up with the elves and the drifters. At nightfall, the chick with anger issues Jeanne d'Arc and her simp Gilles de Rais, as well as several soldiers of the Black King's army, approach the drifters' hideout. They arrive shortly at the camp and the assault begins. After evacuating the elven women and children, Toyohisa confronts Joan, who he mistakes for a man, while the pretty boy faces off against a big brick wall named Jill. Joan starts burning everything and Olmenu comes and creates walls to protect Toyohisa. He then takes her and retreats, thanking her for saving his life. As Olmenu states she can create 2 more walls, Toyohisa asks her to do as he says and then escape in the forest. Joan burns the forest trying to find Toyohisa, but he appears behind her. She cuts his left and right path, telling him he won't escape, but Toyohisa tells her he doesn't plan to. Olmenu creates a wall behind him and he steps on it, biting his sword. Olmenu then creates a second wall on the first wall and launches Toyohisa straight ahead towards Joan, kicking her and sending her straight into a well. Toyohisa realizes Joan is a woman and tells her to leave and act as a woman, but she gets angry and explains she fought for France, but he knocks her, commenting he doesn't know France. Meanwhile, the dude who looks like a chick is struggling in his battle against Jill due to the latter's inhuman strength and durability. Thankfully, before Yoichi is nearly killed, Butch and the Sundance Kid arrive at the scene, using their Gatling gun to destroy Jill's body and save Yoichi. However, Jill is still standing with fire in his heart that got extinguished when he saw his tomboy queen Joan being rescued by the Dragon Riders. Thus, he dies with a smile and promises to wait for Joan to join her in the afterlife as he disintegrates into salt. After reuniting Olmenu, Abe introduces himself to the drifters as the leader of the Octobrist organization. Abe tells Nobunaga the reason they were brought to the New World, and that is to help fight the Ends. Toyohisa returns and informs the group that he knocked Joan unconscious in a nearby well. So a base gender equality advocate Abe scolds Toyohisa for allowing Joan to escape due to her gender, but Toyohisa doesn't care as he is determined to uphold his principles and not become Murasaki's pawn. The next day comes and we see the Roman tactician Scipio, who was separated from Abe's group during the ride to rendezvous with Toyohisa's group, encounters Naoshi, who has been appointed the sky god to a tribe of anthropomorphic dogs. Back at the drifters' camp, Butch and Sundance Kid explain the mechanics behind their firearms to Nobunaga, who becomes ecstatic at the notion of producing more modern firearms. At nightfall, Toyohisa leads his group to free the dwarves from Orte, while Abe, Butch, and Sundance Kid leave to search for Scipio and continue their investigation on the Ends. While Count Saint Jeremy and his aides journey to the Elven village to meet with the drifters, Toyohisa's group attack the Orte Empire's largest armory in Gadoka to save the dwarves. Nobunaga, having made the black powder, had created bombs and starts an attack on Gadoka. As the elves throw bombs, the soldiers start to panic seeing all the explosions. The castle gates open and fully armored troops come and Toyohisa tells the elves to run. Olmenu then surrounds them with stone walls and Toyohisa tells the elves to throw the bombs inside, obliterating their heavy infantry. They close the gates and Nobunaga wonders how would they enter. He then wonders why they took Hannibal with them, but Hannibal makes Stairs signal with his arms. The one-eyed tactician Hannibal gives the one-eyed demon Lord Nobunaga the idea to use Yoichi's arrows and Olmenu's stone wall spells to cast a staircase alongside the gate, enabling Toyohisa's group to invade the town and free the dwarves. Seeing how skinny they are, Toyohisa orders meals to be prepared for them instead of taking down the castle defenders. Toyohisa goes to the soldiers and tells them that the dwarves are eating right now, and if they drop their weapons, they will be allowed to leave. Otherwise, when the dwarves are done, they will kill them. The soldiers decide to give up, and as they open the gates, Toyohisa tells them their commander needs to end his life. But as he refuses, he cuts his head, telling him he isn't fit for a lord. When Yoichi prepares to pursue the fleeing troops, Toyohisa stops him and tells him that he does not have to follow dishonorable ways anymore since this is their war, putting a tear in our little boy's eye. Meanwhile, a member of the Octobrist organization and his partner Dog spy on the Ents at Carneades. They are horrified to learn that the Black King taught primitive agriculture to the monsters that will someday replace the humans once the Ents have eliminated mankind. The Black King attempts to recruit one of the 6 great dragons, the Bronze Dragon, into joining his army, but is met with contempt and refusal by the latter for subjugating his dragon brethren as pets in his army. Using his ability to replicate the cells of any life form, the Black King gave him the Deadpool treatment and infected the Bronze Dragon with a cancerous growth on his body to gain his compliance. Afterward, Rasputin presents the completion of a simple alphabet and a syncretic religion for the demi-humans to learn to help establish a unified multiracial community as per the Black King's wishes. Meanwhile, Joan awakens from her coma after her fight with Toyohisa and is informed by Anastasia that her simp is dead. An enraged Joan vows to avenge her fallen comrade by killing Toyohisa, to which Anastasia scolds her for her recklessness before promising to let her do as she pleases when the time comes. Back in Vidolka, Nobunaga requests that the dwarves begin forging muskets for their army to use in future battles. The next day, Count St. Jeremy and his fellow queens arrive in Vidolka to meet with the drifters, sending his aides to test Toyohisa to see if they are worthy to ally with. St. Jeremy reveals that he is a drifter, and that he wants to sell the Orte Empire to the drifters before Orte is destroyed by other warring countries. To accomplish this, St. Jeremy recommends that the drifters overthrow the Orte Empire and seize their territory. Earlier, St. Jeremy asks the drifters about their names. He recognizes Toyohisa from the Battle of Sekigahara, Yoichi from the Genpei War, and comments that he is famous, and then tells Nobunaga he is super famous. Nobunaga realizes that St. Jeremy came from a later time than them, and St. Jeremy asks Toyohisa if he wants to know what happened, but Toyohisa tells him he already knows. Arriving at Orte capital Verlina, a soldier stops St. Jeremy carriage asking who he is, but Alesta explains and threatens him to send him to the front line for stopping St. Jeremy's carriage. Having called the Orte leaders, St. Jeremy informs them that they are shutting down Orte. He had allowed them to rule the country 50 years ago, but now he is taking it back and will start new life with Toyohisa as leader. Most of them agree with St. Jeremy, but 2 of them disagree, revealing to be controlled by Rasputin. Having entered the capital with St. Jeremy's carriage, Toyohisa and the rest arrive at the meeting, where Rasputin revealed that the Black King is also planning to seize the Orte Empire for his campaign. As the soldiers enter the room, Toyohisa quickly cuts them down. Rasputin realizes this is the leader Toyohisa, but as he attempts to talk to him, Toyohisa completely ignores him and heads and starts beating his puppet. After being humiliated by Toyohisa and Nobunaga, Rasputin retreats. He explains the situation to Toshizo, who tells him to leave everything to him and he will take Orte. The Black King tells them that if they think Orte isn't obtainable, they can change their plan and crush it by causing maximum destruction and chaos. Nobunaga and St. Jeremy then start to argue, as St. Jeremy said he only brought 500 soldiers as it was intended for a normal coup and not a war. Seeing them all muscular, but topless and holding hands, St. Jeremy explains they are his sacred band of thieves. They give St. Jeremy's men muskets, and Toyohisa explains that Nobunaga will lead them, while he leads the dwarves and Yoichi the elves. Nobunaga guesses that the enemy had probably changed their plan and will now kill and destroy anything they see. As the battle starts, Nobunaga orders his men to shoot, making the enemy experience firearms for the first time. As they gun down the front line, the rest realize they can't just go ahead anymore, and Toyohisa then charges with his men. Toshizo is seen elsewhere. Looking at the battle and how his soldiers are being killed, he gets angry. Toyohisa and the dwarves push forward and slaughter the enemy troops. Nobunaga instructs Yoichi to keep firing and break their rear. Toshizo tells the infantry to pull back and rear guards to spread out and split into smaller groups. Yoichi observes this and informs Nobunaga that they are burning the houses and obscuring their vision. Nobunaga then guesses that the enemy leader knows about firearms as they are adapting too fast. Toshizo finds Toyohisa and introduces himself as Hijikata Toshizo from the Shinsengumi, commenting that he will never forget the Shimazu clan. Toyohisa realizes he is from different era than him and wonders what his descendants had done to him. Toshizo gets angry and releases his power. Nobunaga wonders what they must do, and Hannibal comes and tells him they need to do berry smashing and throws some berries and starts smashing them, explaining they taste better if he smashes them all together. Nobunaga then calls Yoichi and asks him if the enemy is randomly setting up the fires. As Yoichi observes, he realizes they are moving in a pattern that heads towards the Capitol building, and Nobunaga realizes they still haven't given up on taking the country. Toshizo uses his power, creating smoke with ghostly images of dead Shinsengumi to attack Toyohisa. Our boy then jumps in a building and comes out from a different window, closing the distance to Toshizo. But as Toshizo steps back and is about to use his power again, Toyohisa jumps into another window, and as he comes out, he throws plates at Toshizo, which angers him even more for not fighting like a warrior. But Toyohisa explains that this is a war and he is not supposed to fight like a warrior. His only goal is to cut off the enemy's head. Toshizo engages him and manages to break his katana, and then attacks him with his power, inflicting several cuts on him. He tells Toyohisa that he underestimated him, but Toyohisa says that he never underestimated him. Meanwhile, Nobunaga calls for everyone to gather and forms a plan. They let the enemy enter the Capitol building and then set it on fire and close the doors with Olmanu's magic, not letting them out and killing anyone who attempts. Seeing that, Toyohisa explains that Yoichi and Nobunaga consider him as a leader, but he never thought of himself like that, but knew that if he buys enough time, Nobunaga will figure something out and turn the tide. The dwarves then get behind Toyohisa and he orders them to fire. In doing so, some of the shards cut Toyohisa, but they manage to disperse Toshizo's smoke, making him realize that Toyohisa is the biggest fool he's ever seen. Toyohisa then jumps and attacks Toshizo in a fistfight. With their army destroyed, the Black King orders Hijikata, who was getting his ass clapped, to withdraw from his fight against Toyohisa. That said, back in Carneades, Rasputin apologizes to the Black King for their failure in seizing Orte, though the Black King is pleased that they were able to cripple the capital city and gauge the Drifter's strength. And the show ends on a cliffhanger with Akachi, who, after hearing Nobunaga's voice, realizes why they weren't able to find his remains and decides to join the Black King so that he can kill Nobunaga. The end. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe for more amazing recaps.